Now, Ron Paul had some trouble back in the day, back when he was in Congress and running for president. There were some old newsletters that appeared to be racist. Now, the reality is everybody at this point admits that portions of those newsletters were racist, but they claim several defenses. Oh, Ron Paul didn't write them. He had somebody else write them. He just profited off of them. Well, they were a long time ago, and people were more racist back then. They don't quite frame it that way, but that's the gist of that excuse, a long time ago, right? Well, let's see what Ron Paul thinks of African Americans these days. Listen carefully here. It begins pretty good. He's talking about people who are opposed to war, like including the Congressional Black Caucus, who were his allies in opposing war. It doesn't end well, though.
I was always annoyed with it in Congress because we had an anti-war unofficial group, the few libertarian Republicans, and then generally the Black Caucus and others did not. They're really against war because they want all that money to go to food stamps for people here.
They were opposed to war, but only because they wanted all that money to go to food stamps. You know, because black people, they're the ones getting all the food stamps, the welfare queens, et cetera. Nice assumptions, Ron. Nice job. All right, so who actually uses SNAP? That's the food stamp program. Well, it goes 43% to whites, 33% to African Americans, 19% to Hispanics, 2% Asian, 2% Native American. Now, look, yes, so more whites use it in the country than blacks. But of course, understand that there are far more whites in the country than there are blacks. So as a ratio, African Americans do get it somewhat disproportionately. Okay, so I'm keeping it real, okay? But at the same time, Africans are also disproportionately poor in this country. And you know, there's a story we've covered before where the average white household is at a wealth of about $150,000. The average African American household has a wealth of $11,000. It's an enormous disparity. When you're born poor, it's much more likely that you will need assistance at some point, okay? Now, despite all that, the majority of people who get food stamps in the country are white. So the idea that, oh yeah, you know, the blacks, they care about the food. And by the way, do you not care? Do you not care about the poor or the people who need a little bit of assistance? You know how many people in the country use food stamps? 18%. And when they polled them, there were some differences between races we just showed you and Republicans and Democrats. But when they asked, what is your political ideology? It was exactly down the middle. 17% conservatives, 17% of conservatives use food stamps, 17% of liberals, and 17% of moderates use food stamps, which is exactly the national average, or very close to the national average. So it is something that applies to a lot of Americans. In fact, the food stamp capital of the country is in Owsley County, Kentucky, okay? And Owsley County, Kentucky is 99.2% white and 95% Republican. Now, they're the food stamp capital because they have the highest food stamps per capita. So if you want to talk about averages and getting the right numbers, they have over half of the residents getting food stamps there because they're incredibly poor. Now, some people will point to that and go, you see, that food stamps didn't work. They were poor back when it started in 1964, the whole war on poverty, and they're poor now. Yeah, but relatively, they're much wealthier, and they're not dying anymore from hunger. I would chalk that up as a win. Apparently they don't, because they keep voting for Republicans who keep cutting food stamps. Oops. By the way, now Ron Paul's not relevant anymore. He's not in Congress. He's not running for president. But there is a guy in Congress who's running for president with the last name, Paul. That would be his son, Rand Paul. And which state is he a senator from? Oh, right, Kentucky. So where they need food stamps the most, where it is overwhelmingly white, certainly in some counties, including the food stamp capital of the whole country, but when his father's talking about it and the whole great libertarian ideology, food stamps, goes to the blacks. You know how it is. And that's all they care about. And that's the only reason they vote against war, which was the one piece of credit he was giving them.